it's Blanco, the Artsy sister, and we're continuing Saturnastra Woden. And this is chapter 2, the fire demon Ethyl. No, she gestured to me and whispered, "Come out here and face me." "No, you come in here and fight me." After thinking a bit about it, and must we partake on this type of charade? And also pointless fighting had taken all of the bloodlust out of me. "Now this is a surprise," commented Ethyl. "And given enough time, everyone changes, usually for the worse." And I extended my hand and said, "A truce." Ethyl hesitated a bit, but eventually she extended her hand, and taking it, I pulled her closer swiftly. And I was going to bite her nose off, but I was stopped by Woden, who sensed my mischievous intent, and Ethyl pulled herself back and rubbed her hand with her other hand, and my icy shield had harmed her a bit, and her fire did not bother me, and my true home is pretty hot around the edges, and one eventually gets used to it. It has been pretty cold as of lately, having frozen over. Because the demon Bayl is from hell. So of course it's used to, so of course a fire elemental is gonna be like, meh. So yeah. Like I said before, given enough time, one gets used to anything. And speaking of time, it seemed like it would take some time indeed for Ethyl to figure out what I'm all about. And turning my attention back to Woden, she was in the middle of being interrogated by the old hag. And everything that the old woman asked, Woden had a cryptic answer, and since Woden had not explained her magic, Agnes had decided to find out about Woden's relations. "And where are you from?" asked Agnes. "I am from down here," answered Woden, tapping the floor. "Who are your parents?" asked Agnes. "Don't know, just two people who feed and clothe me," answered Woden. "Where are they now?" "Don't know," said Woden. "How old are you?" "Don't know," said Woden, shrugging her shoulder as she continued playing with a bit of string. And I could attest to the fact that Woden did not know her true age. And now that I think about it, neither do I. Age is just a problem for mortals, whose body has an expiration date. Not that it is not uncommon for Woden's people to die, rather their usual deaths are usually quite eventful, and occasionally somewhat humorous, but always violent. "And how do you come to my home?" "You took me here against my will," responded Woden. "You are quite a difficult child, are you not?" commented Agnes, folding her arms. "And what use would it be to you to know my life story? And if you give me a proper answer to this question, then maybe I will indulge you as well," answered Woden. And indeed, my fellow Woden was not one to bother answering pointless questions, as her people had shared memories. They never had a need to ask such superfluous questions, and Agnes was silent for a moment as if indeed thought. And Ethyl, who had caught the gist of the conversation, commented, "What an annoying little toad." "Never knew a toddler who wasn't a pain in one way or another," I said to Ethyl. And Woden pretended not to hear me, and the hours rolled by as Agnes finally slept sitting down, and from time to time she would almost tip over towards the floor, but then Ethyl gave her a slight push back to keep her sitting. And we were all quiet as we waited for the hag to wake up or expire. It was not till noon when the old woman finally woke up, and Agnes looked around and seemed a bit disoriented, and she saw Woden and asked, "And what are you doing here? How did you get here?" And Woden said nothing, and she sat there waiting for Agnes to remember. And Ethyl eventually said to Agnes, "You found another brat in the woods, and you are taking her to the orphanage." "Ah, yes," said Agnes, remembering somewhat. Getting up, she cooked for herself a humble breakfast of boiled eggs, and she gave one to Woden, who looked as if he was not convinced. And Agnes saw me, and she handed me my own egg and one of Ethyl, and somewhat in her current confused state of mind, she saw that I was a familiar, and that was enough to warrant some semblance of hospitality. And when Agnes was not looking, Woden handed me the egg, and I bit down on the first egg, and I found it rather crunchy. It had a hard outer shell with a squishy interior, and the way I was eating my eggs made Woden laugh, and Ethyl too saw me and started to chuckle. And feeling a bit foolish, I swallowed the second egg whole, imagining that it was a little bit like drinking a tablet. And after half choking a bit, I concluded our meager breakfast. At its conclusion, Woden was wrapped in a blanket and tied to the back of the old woman like a sack of potatoes. Then again, it was common for farmers to carry their curious about on their backs, and a little bit like kangaroos, except with their pouches are on their back. And Agnes seemed in a much better mood, and it was almost as if her personality had changed with the coming of morning. And Woden explained to me that humans need sleep, and when they do not get enough, they suffer a lot of mental problems, and worst case scenario, they were prone to hallucinations and even death. And Woden was quiet all the while she was carried, and she had a stern look on her face, which was a bit unusual for her. And once the time was within sight, Woden finally said, I can take it from here, you should go home and rest. I'm fine, said Agnes stoically. No, you are not, said Woden, slipping out of Agnes' back and standing in front of her. She repeated, no, you are not. I'm fine, just a tad old, that's all, said Agnes, and I placed my hand on Woden's shoulder and I shook my head sadly. And Woden lowered her head to cover it with her robes to form a hood, and she took the old woman's hand and held it firmly, and the old woman guided Woden to the marketplace, and eventually they arrived at a manor, and inside there were plenty of children playing in the courtyard, and a woman dressed in red came to receive Woden, and shaking her hand warmly, she kneeled down to take a better look at Woden, and she asked Agnes, is this another one of those lost children you find in the forest? This one is different. Agnes reached into her pocket and she brought out a box filled with precious gems, and she added, take especially good care of this one. The lady lowered Woden's hood and she saw Woden's black hair and cat-green eyes, and the pupil had a slight vertical slit, and Agnes too had good eyes like those, and in spite of the fact that she was a purebred human, at least she smelled like a purebred human, and now that I think about it, genetic mutations could happen given enough time. I mean, the humans from my generation were a lot heavier than the ones I see walking around today. And I guess I'm giving too much thought into it, and for all my years, I never bothered to look into the science stuff. And I also do not perceive things like lesser creatures, and when I refer to pure, I refer to the essence of the soul. And she has a soul that qualifies her as human, however there are plenty of non-human creatures that have human souls. And as far as her soul is concerned, Woden is not human, and she is something else, and it is very interesting to see her acting out in the real world. And by touching her magical rose, it seemed to me that Agnes had given Woden part of herself, and even Woden saw that quite a very peculiar human scent, but only on the surface. And even she had acquired magical attributes very similar to the hag Agnes. And the lady asked Agnes, who exactly is this girl? Her name is Woden, said Agnes, and then she made her way towards the forest while she was trailed by Ethyl. And it took her one last look at Woden before she turned to the corner, and it seemed to me that she was crying. Poor Ethyl, I said. And why is she crying? asked Woden without speaking. You will understand when you are older, I answered. But I'm already older, and I am practically ancient, insisted Woden. Sure you are, I said, ending the conversation. The lady picking up Woden asked, and do you speak, and do you understand me? And Woden said nothing, and she made her small body go limp, and she was neither listening nor paying attention to anything the lady was telling her. And the lady was apparently called Lady Isabella Josefa, and she was a petit bourgeoise at the moment from a fallen hold. And at the age of 45, she ran the local orphanage, and having lost her own children in the wars, she took care of whatever homeless child was found. And if they were alone and begging in the streets, they were taken to her to raise till a more financial stable family could be found. And I tried to look through some superficial memories to see if she was secretly a douche, but apparently she was not. A purebred, boring little angel she was. And Lady Josefa was used to her own children being quiet the first time they entered her orphanage, and she took Woden to the kitchen, and she had one of her maids make Woden a sweet pastry. And Woden and I noticed that the maid was one of the orphan children. At the age of 15, she was too old to be adopted, and she was within marriageable age, as such Lady Josefa thought it would be a good idea to teach a girl a task fitting of her station. And for a penniless girl, Josefa imagined that the best job for them would be that of a maid. And it seemed like an easier job than agriculture or prostitution. And I have finally pinpointed the thing that made Josefa a douche. She was a narrow-minded fellow, and during my time it was believed that men created agriculture, and in reality it was through women that humanity was able to acquire its early knowledge. And we like human women, but since peacocking did not seem to work, we would woo them by offering them knowledge. The rest, I would say, is history. And back to Woden. My niece looked at the sweetbread with disdain, and she sighed while she rested her head sideways on the table, where she looked bleakly at the pastry, and Josefa left Woden alone in the kitchen, and while she went to tend to some of her more cheerful children, and the maid said, you better cheer up, otherwise you will never get out of this place. I will do things on my own time, thank you very much, pouted Woden. Ah, so you do speak, and quite eloquently, I might add, said the maid. Time, bro?
14 minutes.
I speak only to those who have ears to listen, and your message does not strike me as a person who enjoys listening. And she talks to her children, but she doesn't have an actual conversation with them, explained Woden. How perceptive of you, said the maid, genuinely impressed. And from my experience, Woden was always good at reading people, and she only closed her heart to people she considered disingenuous. And Woden continued, so what is it that you do around here? Isn't it obvious, said the maid. Not to me it isn't, said Woden. I cooked snacks, but mostly I cleaned the cookery and polished the silverware. I also scrubbed the kitchen floor and I monitored the oven, explained the maid. And Woden thought a moment, and then she said, "So you're a scullery maid, and do you do anything else? Do you know any other household chores?" "No, this is just about it, and the lady did not want to overwhelm me with information," explained the scullery maid. "Am I to assume you did not get much reading?" asked Woden. "A mother can only do so much, and a town as small as this one doesn't offer a ragged school," explained the maid. Like, that's what they used to call in medieval times, like poor people's school, a rag school. "Mother Pity," said Woden more to herself, and then she asked, "And by the way, what is the name of this town?" "This town is called Aurum," said the maid, "and now that I think about it, we have not properly been introduced. My name is Mirta Hickory." "Oh, like the tree," said Woden. "Like what tree?" asked Mirta. "Well, your last name is the type of wood that is all," said Woden. "I see," said Mirta, growing quiet for a moment. And both maidens grew silent and solemn, and there was the dull sound of the heels cracking against the marble floor, and the faint rustling of sound of satin skirt. And Woden took the sweet pastry and placed it beneath her robes, and the moment that Mirta looked towards the door, she handed the sweet to me. I indeed found it charming, but I felt like it was missing something crucial to wash it down. And even some water would have been useful, and talk about showing very little hospitality. And for all the humans know, Woden could be dehydrated, and Lady Josefa was pleased to see the pastry gone. And she gave a peripheral look at the kitchen, and all the pans and the floors and the fireplace was sparkling clean. And even the recently used oven had been shining down like a diamond. And Mita lowered her gaze and stepped back a bit, and Lady Josefa was pleased at her maid's meek behavior. And Lady Josefa then sat down with a small book and quill and brush, and she opened it to the end. And the book had a ledger with the name and birthplace and adoption status of every children, and it included a basic description of them and their temperament. And Lady Josefa thought a moment about a proper name for Woden, and Woden was not in the mood of being renamed. As such, she used her telepathy to make Josefa think of the name Woden. And before she realized that Josefa had written down the name Woden, and she stared at the paper, and she blinked twice, a bit confused as to what had just occurred. And Lady Josefa then said, "Aha, now I remember that dear Agnes said that your name was Woden. A bit of a little melodramatic name. Ah, yes, a family name. Mirta opened her mouth to say something, but she remembered that Lady Josefa no longer treated her as she once did, and now their relationship was business only. And while the lady was lost in her reverie, she did not notice Woden coming closer, and taking her quill, she wrote in large bold letters on a single blank page and in exquisite cursive her complete name, Woden O-O-R. Normally her people did not use last names, still they had a provisional last name in the case they had to deal with that nonsense. And the name Woden meant for my companion possess or obsess, and at times she was a bit of the first, and since to my interference. And as for or, it meant soul, song, or inspiration. And in its negative form, it meant violent. And Woden also meant angry, so this was apparently Woden's long-winded way of making her foul mood known. And the signature took Lady Josefa by surprise, and she was both impressed and rather angry. And she did not know how to react to the child who knew how to write her name with such exquisite Lucinda cursive. And eventually the impression of emotion won, and Lady Josefa asked, "When and where did you learn to write?" "Do you truly want an answer, or do you just want to listen to the sound of your own voice?" asked Woden. "Try speaking more clearly. I am unable to understand you," said Lady Josefa. And Woden then started modulating her voice, "Ga, ga, 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 pepita, ta, ta, pupululu." And Lady Josefa had no patience for her nonsense, and opening her book to a blank page, she said, "Write down what you wish to say." And Woden had heard of this once before, and some adults for some reason do not make sense of what children say, even when they are speaking with perfect diction. And when dealing with one of those fellows, it was recommended to avoid conversation altogether or to speak without using one's voice. And coming to stand behind Woden, I said to her, "This is a waste of time. Let's go already. We have places to be, remember?" And Woden got up and started to walk away when she noticed something strange. And my skin too started to crawl, and I grew tense for reasons I did not understand. Yes, it was the familiar feeling, and it clung to the pottery, the dingy wine bottles, and the floor fleshy was with stagnant mosquito-infested water. And Lady Josefa saw Woden clench her fists while her breathing became more agitated, and she had seen this many a times when the children were having a tantrum, and Woden then took a deep breath and passed her hand over her hair, pushing it back, and now she was calm again, and she ran past Lady Josefa, and she started to look around. And as we walked the house of the orphanage, we passed by many rooms and saw many children, and eventually we saw one of them staring at something that resembled a black smudge. And Woden too started to stare at it. And it looked like a weird cow with a human face, and the face had two faces like those of a clown, and one a man and the other a woman, and aside from the others, it had the woman's breast, and the front legs were like those of a pig, and the human face, a weird spot on the wall. The human face had a silly blue hat, and the face staring back at the child was that of a man. And more children started gathering in front of the black sludge, and the male face was staring down on the children while the female side of the face glanced at the man, and the female face was more complete with the man's face in a side profile, and it was quite disturbing indeed. And Woden and I stared and pondered, and we stared and pondered while the smudge stared right back at us with their eyes unblinking. And Woden then reached into her pocket and brought out a tiny marble, and she stared right through it while fixated in the weird smudge. And it was then when the female face turned to look at Woden, and one look at her rose, and the smudge acquired a strange color, and it made an unusual distorted squeal, like a mixture squeal of mooing, and a jump at the wall, and a drawer at the wallpaper, tearing off the creature. And I tried to drag it into Woden's marble while it tried to drag me into its cursed domain. And eventually Woden's summoning this creature was concluded, and the being that was inside the wall was safely removed into the marble for the time being. Time rule?
Settlement.
The children only saw the wallpaper being ripped out, and this naturally frightened them who ran. And those who did perceive the scream, and even those who had seen me, were even more frightened. And there was chaos and screaming and lamentation, the type only a child would express when face to face with indescribable horror. And Woden entered inside the crystal world inside her marble, and fragmented and swirling like the cat's eye marble that it was. And at its red center there was a strange beast raging and howling. And using her bit of string, Woden summoned forth one of her brother's ifrits to test out the creature's strength. And since fire did not work, it fell upon me to try to hurt it with ice. And this still did not work, and after making our way through all of the classical elemental magic, Woden tied it with bits of string and started sending the creature along a different dimensional axis. And once its shadow became a physical object, I drew closer for the kill, and it was easy to find its core through the shadow. And the creatures usually had a core that one had to destroy it conveniently went away. And the only problem that it would only manifest when you completely destroy their physical bodies. And it manifested to regrow itself, and in order to hurry me up, it manifested one of those large grandfather claws I always found annoying. And I eventually found the core, and it was round and sandy to the touch, and when it made an effort to crush it, I cracked up, revealing a conjoined twin, male and female, fused at the face and its parts of their body. And they made a terrible shrinking sound which completely tore my physical body. And since harming them physically was out of the question, I dug even deeper into the spirit body, and strings started to tie themselves around me, and I felt Woden's essence infusing my body with magic. And even without a physical body, I could still harm them in the physical world. And with her magic, she crushed them and pulverized them with the glow of silver and blue fire, and I then destroyed what was left of their soul. And the creature slowly was consumed by fire, and the fire was eventually as small as a candle. And Woden drew closer to it, and she licked her index finger and her thumb, and then she extinguished it like. And when we returned from the marble world, we saw that the wallpaper fully restored, and it had its original beautiful luster. And the only hint that it had ever been haunted by a creature was a blue cap Woden found on the floor. And the cap was native to a planet known as Tellus, last I checked. And it got renamed over the course of many millennia, and now Woden was desiring to examine the cap better, but Mita was coming over, followed by Lady Josefa and the army of frightened children. And when Lady Josefa arrived, she said, "See, there's nothing there. But there was a monster," insisted one of the children. "And it made a loud moo," said another. "And it was like, oh, shush," said another. And with all of the jabbering together, Lady Josefa said, "Enough, I will hear no more of this nonsense. Go outside and play, or do your chores, or so help me God, I will show you a real master after I give you a good licking," without weeping. They shouldn't have quieted down after hearing that threat, and Woden and I exchanged dour looks, and we were starting to detest this orphanage lady by the minute. And as the shooting dispersed, Lady Josefa gave one last look at the wall, and she passed her hand up and down her shoulders in order to ward away the shivers. And turning to look at Woden, she said, "See, there is nothing there, just an old stain on the wall." And Lady Josefa left after saying that, and Mita too went to stare at the wall, and after a couple of minutes, Woden said, "There's nothing there anymore." "I know, but I can't help but feel that there is something, and when I was small, I used to see it from time to time creeping about, whispering bad thoughts, and many children disappeared because of it, but when I told the lady, she said it was just my imagination," explained Mirza. "I don't think anyone else is going to be disappearing for the time being. You have my promise," said Woden, looking serious, and eventually Mita asked the obvious question, "What are you exactly?" "I'm just a girl who is terrible at hide and seek," said Woden, putting her hand to her forehead and shaking it sadly. And then she added, turning to Mita, "I'm just a very knowledgeable human, and since the moment I was born I was taught many things, and now I was left on my own to see what I could make for myself with the few meager skills I possess." "So you were abandoned," asked Myrta. "Just like everyone else here, and I wanted to be with the witch and to play with all of her favorite things, but she did not want me, so now I am here," said Woden, sighing. And Myrta patted Woden's head and said, "There, little one, she is old, and she thought that you would be better off here, and I bet she can barely take care of herself, let alone a granddaughter." And Woden said, pushing Myrta's hand away, And by now it was close to dusk, and Myrta was summoned to the kitchen, and she prepared dinner along with the other cooks, and from time to time the children were fed chicken broth with a piece of bread, and unlike other orphanage, Lady Josefa fed her children some sort of meat at least once every 3 days. And for dessert, the children were given cherries and wild berries, and it was common for Myrta to enter the forest in search of other supplements for their children's diet. And it wasn't required, but it wasn't discouraged either, and for what I could tell, the forest at the moment had a nice growth of red raspberries, blueberries, red currants, and blackberries, and I made a mental note of each of the locations. Alright, so let's continue with this adventure later. Bye-bye, God bless.